"Get lost, you pathetic old beggar!" they yelled, confiscating his few coins and mocking his limp. When the armed robbery started, his muscle memory kicked in. Welcome to Silent Legends. Before we begin this powerful story of disrespect, redemption, and the warrior who never truly retires, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from today? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button. These forgotten heroes need their voices heard. The corner of 5th and Main had been his spot for 3 years now. Every morning at 7 a.m., he would shuffle to the same weathered brick wall, unfold his collapsible chair, and place his beaten guitar case on the sidewalk in front of him. His name was Detective Sergeant Michael Torres, but nobody had called him that in a long time. Now they just called him the old man with the limp. The limp came from Fallujah, 2004. The scars on his hands came from 23 years on the force. The tremor in his left arm came from watching too many good men die. But the strangers passing by didn't know any of that. They just saw a broken-down street musician with weathered clothes and a face that had seen too much. He wasn't really homeless. He had a small apartment 6 blocks away, paid for by his disability pension. But the walls were too quiet, and the memories too loud. So he came here, to the corner, where the city moved around him like a river around a stone. He played simple songs on an old acoustic guitar, and people dropped coins into his case when they felt generous. Most ignored him. Some were kind. But the young officers from the 14th Precinct, the ones who patrolled this beat, they had made him their personal project. It started small. Officer Jake Morrison, 24 years old, fresh from the academy, would walk by and make comments. "Still here, old man?" he'd say with a smirk. "Maybe try getting a real job." His partner, Officer Dean Walsh, was worse. He'd intentionally stepped close to the guitar case, accidentally kicking it so the coins scattered. They didn't know he had once worn the same badge they did. They didn't know he had trained officers just like them. They didn't ask, and he didn't tell. Some stories were too heavy to carry in conversation. But this Tuesday morning was different. Morrison and Walsh approached with a swagger that meant trouble. Morrison's radio was crackling with dispatch calls, and Walsh was chewing gum like he was trying to crack it. "All right, Gramps," Morrison said, standing over Torres with his thumbs hooked in his duty belt. "Time to move along. You're disturbing the peace." Torres looked up slowly. He had been playing "The House of the Rising Sun," his fingers moving automatically through chords he'd known for decades. He stopped playing but didn't speak. "You deaf, old man?" Walsh stepped closer, his boot deliberately hitting the guitar case. A few quarters rolled into the street. He said, "Move." "I'm not disturbing anyone," Torres said quietly. His voice was gravelly from years of cigarettes he'd quit too late. "I've been here 3 years. Never had a complaint." Morrison laughed, the kind of laugh that had sharp edges. "Look at you. Pathetic. You're what, 60? 70? Sitting on the street like some kind of vagrant." "Get lost, you pathetic old beggar," Walsh yelled, leaning down and scooping the remaining coins from the guitar case. He shoved them into his pocket. "Find yourself a shelter or something. This is a respectable neighborhood." Torres watched the money disappear into Walsh's pocket. $17.34. Enough for lunch and maybe coffee. He had counted it earlier, the way you count things when they matter. "That's theft," Torres said simply. Morrison's hand moved instinctively toward his sidearm. "What did you just say to me?" "You took money that wasn't yours. That's theft." Torres's voice remained calm, but something in his posture had shifted. His shoulders were straighter. His eyes were focused. Walsh stepped closer, his chest puffed out. "Are you threatening a police officer, you worthless piece of—" The gunshots cut him off. 3 rapid pops from across the street. A woman screamed, car tires squealed, and suddenly the morning air was filled with the sound of chaos and terror. Torres's head snapped toward the sound with mechanical precision. His eyes tracked movement, assessed angles, calculated distances. 40 years of training didn't die just because you retired. It hibernated, waiting for the moment when lives depended on what your hands remembered. Morrison and Walsh froze. They had been trained for this, but training was different from the real thing. Morrison fumbled for his radio. Walsh reached for his weapon but couldn't get it clear of the holster. Torres was already moving. The limp was gone. The tremor in his left hand had stopped. He rose from his chair like a machine switching on, every movement deliberate and controlled. His right hand moved to his back pocket and withdrew something small and black. A radio, old, scratched but functional. "This is Detective Sergeant Michael Torres, badge number 4471, he said into the radio, his voice cutting through the morning air with authority that made both young officers turn and stare. "Armed robbery in progress, 5th and Main, southwest corner. 3 suspects, at least 1 firearm visible, requesting immediate backup and ambulance." Morrison's mouth fell open. Walsh stopped fumbling with his gun. Torres clipped the radio to his belt and looked at both officers with the kind of gaze that had intimidated suspects and commanded respect in briefing rooms for over 2 decades. "Morrison," he said, and the younger officer's name came out like a sharp command. "Take the east approach, stay low, use the parked cars for cover. Walsh, you're with me. We're going around the back." "Wait," Morrison stammered. "You're not... How do you know our—" "Move!" Torres barked, and both officers found themselves obeying without thinking. The robbery was happening at Chen's Electronics, a small shop that had been on that corner for 15 years. 3 men, masks, 1 shotgun visible. Mrs. Chen was on the ground behind the counter, and Torres could see her shoulders shaking from where he crouched behind a delivery truck. Walsh crept up beside him, his earlier arrogance replaced by something that looked like confusion mixed with respect. "Who are you?" Walsh whispered. Torres pulled out his wallet and flipped it open. Inside was a badge, tarnished but real, and an ID card with his photo and a date that was 3 years old. Detective Sergeant, 23 years of service, decorated veteran. Walsh stared at the badge, then at Torres, then at the badge again. "You were a cop." "I'm a cop," Torres corrected quietly. "I just don't wear the uniform anymore." The radio crackled. Backup was 2 minutes away. Torres studied the scene with eyes that had seen hundreds of similar situations. The suspects were nervous, amateur. The one with the shotgun was holding it wrong, his finger off the trigger. They could be taken without shots fired if it was done right. "On my signal," Torres said, his voice calm and authoritative. "Morrison, you move in from the front, badge visible, weapon drawn but lowered. Walsh, you come with me through the back. The goal is containment and de-escalation." "But you're not—" "I'm what?" Torres's eyes locked onto Walsh's. "I'm not what? Not a cop? Not qualified? Not worth your respect?" Walsh swallowed hard. He looked at the $17.34 he had stuffed in his pocket, and suddenly it felt like it weighed 100 pounds. The takedown was textbook. Morrison approached from the front, following Torres's instructions exactly. Torres and Walsh came through the back entrance just as the suspects realized they were surrounded. The shotgun was secured without a single shot fired. Mrs. Chen was unharmed. When the backup arrived, they found 3 suspects in custody, 2 rookie officers looking shell-shocked, and a man in civilian clothes who was calmly giving statements like he had done it 1,000 times before. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez arrived on scene 10 minutes later. She took one look at Torres, and her face went through several expressions in rapid succession: surprise, recognition, and something that might have been relief. "Torres," she said simply, "I heard you were in the area." "Lieutenant," Torres nodded, "situation is contained." Martinez looked at Morrison and Walsh, both of whom were standing very straight and very quiet. "These your boys?" "They responded appropriately once properly directed," Torres said diplomatically. After the paperwork was filed and the suspects were transported, Martinez walked over to where Torres was sitting on the edge of an ambulance. A paramedic was checking the old injury in his leg, which had started acting up again during the pursuit. "You know, we have an opening in community relations," Martinez said. "Consulting position, part-time, good benefits." Torres was quiet for a long moment. He looked across the street to where his guitar case was still sitting by the brick wall, now surrounded by a small crowd of people who had watched the entire thing unfold. "I'll think about it," he said. Morrison approached hesitantly, holding something in his hand. The $17.34 from Torres's guitar case. "Sir," Morrison said quietly, we didn't know." Torres looked at the money, then at Morrison's face, then at Walsh, who was standing a few feet behind, looking like he wanted to disappear into the pavement. "You didn't know because you didn't ask," Torres said. "You saw someone different from you and decided that meant they were less than you." He took the money and folded it carefully. "The badge doesn't make you a cop. The uniform doesn't make you a cop. How you treat people when you think no one important is watching, that makes you a cop." Morrison nodded, his face red. "Yes, sir." "And Morrison?" "Yes, sir." "Next time you see someone on the street, someone who looks broken down or forgotten, remember that everyone has a story. Everyone has served something bigger than themselves in their own way. Your job isn't to judge them. Your job is to protect and serve them." 3 weeks later, Torres was back on the corner, but now he had a badge clipped to his belt and a radio on his hip. He still played guitar, but now it was during his lunch breaks from his new consulting job with the department. The young officers on the beat stopped by regularly, not to hassle him, but to check in, to ask questions, to learn from someone who had walked the walk longer than they had been alive. And sometimes, late at night, when the city was quiet and the memories got too loud, Torres would take out his phone and look at the commendation letter Lieutenant Martinez had written. It talked about his actions that day, his professionalism, his dedication to service that hadn't ended with retirement. But the part he read most often was a handwritten note at the bottom from Officer Morrison. "Thank you for showing me what it really means to serve. I hope I can earn the respect I should have shown you from the beginning." Some men teach through lectures, others teach through example. Detective Sergeant Michael Torres taught through presence, through dignity under fire, and through the quiet understanding that a badge is earned every day, not just the day you graduate from the academy. He never needed to prove he was a cop. When the moment came, when lives were on the line, the streets remembered who he was, even if the young officers had forgotten to ask. Sometimes the most powerful lessons come from the people we overlook, the ones we judge before we know their story. Detective Torres didn't need recognition, didn't need thanks, didn't need respect. He had earned all of those things decades ago, but he gave something more valuable than any of that. He gave 2 young officers the chance to see what real service looks like. Not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that simply shows up when it's needed most. Have you ever met someone like Detective Torres? Someone you misjudged until you learned who they really were? Share their story in the comments. Let us know what city you're watching from, and if this story moved you, subscribe to Silent Legends. We're here to honor the ones who serve in silence, who carry their badges in their hearts long after they turn in their uniforms. Because heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear old clothes and sit on street corners, waiting for the moment when the city needs them one more time. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next story.